So this is coming in the news today here on Sunday, March 6th. It appears that Vladimir Putin is telling Ukraine to stop fighting against Russian forces. Now, as you guys know, they came in and there's videos of them trying to tell people, and Putin did this as well, that, lay down your arms and we won't attack you. And in Putin's mind, he, I guess, seems to think that Ukraine is Russian. Ukraine has never been Russian. It never will be Russian. But he wants it to be part of Russia again. He wants to go back to not the Soviet era. He actually wants to go back to the Russian Empire because during the Soviet Union, actually, Ukraine was actually a independent Soviet republic, right? It wasn't part of the empire. He was very mad at Lenin and Stalin and Khrushchev for giving Ukraine independence and giving them land. And so he's telling them to stop fighting. Now, anti-war protests are really growing, and I'm going to do a separate video on that. But there's something like 4,500 people, apparently just on Sunday, detained for protesting against the war in Russia. So it says Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Sunday his campaign in Ukraine was going to plan and would not end until Kyiv stopped fighting, as efforts to evacuate 200,000 people from the heavily bombarded city of Mariupol fell apart for a second day in a row. Most people trapped in the port city are sleeping in bomb shelters to escape more than 6 days of near constant shelling by encircling Russian forces that has cut off food, water, power, and heating supplies, according to the Ukrainian authorities. That's kind of how you know they're losing. Originally, the plan seemed to be to encircle Kiev and take it over. It's the capital, and that failed. And so now they're focusing on Kharkiv and now Mariupol and all these other cities. To me, that's just like, oh yeah, we took the L. But it goes on here to actually say Putin made his demand for Kyiv to end the fighting in a phone call with Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan, who appealed for a ceasefire. Putin told Erdogan he was ready for dialogue with Ukraine and foreign partners, but any attempt to draw out negotiation would fail, a Kremlin statement said. Russian media said Putin also held almost 2 hours of talks on Sunday with French President Emmanuel Macron. Macron told Putin he was concerned about a possible imminent attack on the southern Ukrainian city of Odessa, Macron's office said. And so what it seems like Macron has been trying to do is he's really been trying to be the dialogue guy. He's the European leader who's really trying to take the dialogue route, and he's trying to, even before the invasion, he was trying to have a separate response from the United States and open up a dialogue with Putin. Hasn't really been doing anything. Does that mean it was a bad idea? I don't know. I don't think we really know yet necessarily, but it doesn't seem to have gotten anywhere, at least so far. But, it says Putin told Erdogan he was ready for dialogue with Ukraine and foreign partners, but any attempt to draw out negotiation would fail. So what it seems like to me, they've been trying to do this dialogue, but it seems like the only dialogue that's going to work for Putin is if Ukraine stops fighting and essentially just gives in. That's what it seems like Putin wants here, at the very least. So I think he will, the question still is what exactly is the objective? We know that he's very angry at Lenin mostly, and also Stalin and Khrushchev for giving Ukraine land and making them a country, because he feels like they were never a real country. They're just supposed to be part of the Russian Empire, even though that's not true. And so he wants it to be part of Russia. So does that mean that he wants to annex the country of Ukraine and make it part of the Russian Federation? Or does it mean that he actually wants to just create a puppet government in Ukraine? So it's very unclear, but it seems like the minimum standard for what he desires is at the very least a puppet government in Ukraine. So one that is obviously his government, but it's just it's independent in name only, essentially. So it seems like that's what he's looking for at the least, and so he's telling them to stop fighting. Ukrainians will not stop fighting because Ukrainians really hate Russia a lot, because they've obviously subjected them to their rule for like a couple hundred years or whatever. So they don't like them. There have been lots of systemic attempts by Russian and Soviet leaders to wipe out the Ukrainian identity as a whole. The Ukrainian language, they've made rules to try to, wipe out the Ukrainian language, stop the usage of the language. They've tried, Soviet leaders attempted to funnel a bunch of Russians into Ukraine in order to turn Ukraine into being more Russian. And so Ukrainians have an identity, they have their own language, they have their own identity. And so that's why they're going to continue fighting against Russia. And despite being extremely overmatched, of course, they have, NATO, U.S. intelligence, CIA intelligence, as well as a bunch of equipment coming from NATO countries, as well as sanctions that are being implemented by many countries and now even companies, right? And so with that, I think that they're going to stand a very good chance. How long is it going to take for Putin to pull out if it's not going well? I really don't know. I would imagine if it goes on for longer than 3 weeks, at that point, it kind of has to be a situation of like, okay, are you really going to keep going? Are you really going to keep trying to do this invasion? I think it depends a lot on what happens domestically at home in Russia. But what we can see is they're starting to just attack civilians and just bombing areas. Like they're just, I guess, just bombing buildings and stuff like that, which is just cheap essentially. But it's not looking good for them. But this appears to be what Putin's objective is. But we're not 100% clear yet. But I think that the number one goal of his is to get them to submit to him. He wants Ukraine to submit to Russia and Putin. That's what it seems like he wants them to do at the bare minimum.